Morning, this is Brian. Today is Thursday, April 18th, 2024, and I'm here at Mission Trails Regional Park at the Bushy Hill Trailhead, right off Father Junipero Serra Road. And it's time for a Spotlight on Shrubs video today. Today, my focus is on this beautiful shrub right here. This is Bladder Pod. And this is Cleomella arborea, variety arborea. It is usually a small to medium, sometimes fairly large shrub, and it's a member of the Spiderwort family, the Cleomaceae. And this is a shrub that has been through many, many taxonomical revisions over the years. This shrub has been known as Isomeris arborea, also been known as Cleomaceae isomeris, Cleomaceae arborea, and then also Peritoma arborea. Now the current accepted name is Cleomella arborea. And this is an evergreen shrub that is very pungent. It has a very disagreeable odor if you sniff the leaves of the plant, and is a locally common to very abundant shrub of coastal sage scrub, disturbed areas of chaparral, roadsides, and also naturalized here in Southern California in areas where it would normally not be found. So what we have here is this shrub here is Cleomella arborea, variety arborea, and I will go into some distinctive features of the different varieties of this shrub. But first, let's just talk about some of the general characteristics of Cleomella arborea. So what we have here are these trifoliate leaves that are palmately compound, in other words, divided into 3 leaflets. Sometimes they fold up at the midrib, and sometimes less pronounced so, but it's generally a trifoliate shrub, grayish green foliage. The grayish color helps to reflect some of the excessive sunlight so the plant doesn't dehydrate too much. And it's generally a mounding or upright shrub, as you see here. Sometimes can get pretty tall. This is usually larger than I normally see these plants, but you can see again, that grayish color is a defense against the drought that this plant often experiences in its life. Now, a lot of plants in the Cleomaceae are very fetid or ill-smelling, probably as a tactic to defense against herbivory. So if you do happen to brush up against this plant, it will have a very strong odor. I can smell it right now. It's a very strong odor. I brushed my fingers against it just to test it out for myself. But this plant grows from anywhere near the coast to some inland foothill areas, and it also again appears in the desert. So this plant grows on the coast, foothills, and the desert, generally below 2,000 feet in elevation, as it is a plant that prefers warmer temperatures, less cold at night. So sometimes here in western San Diego County, this plant can be pretty common in some of our coastal canyons as well. Generally likes to grow in dry areas, mostly in open areas of coastal sage scrub, or sometimes chaparral, as seen here. We're in an area of disturbed coastal sage scrub, and it does well on disturbed sites. And how this plant naturalizes in areas where it's not naturally found is by the fact that it does like disturbed areas as well. And often these plants are used as hydro-seeded mixes to control erosion on the side of highways and roads and slopes. So that's also how this plant can spread to where it's naturally not found. So it's very adaptable to our climate, and it actually does make a pretty good plant for show and utility, such as, again, reducing erosion. It's good to use a native plant, so we'll take it at that. But as you notice, this plant is chock full of blooms. A lot of plants in the Spiderwort family have these beautiful yellow flowers. You can see right here, I'm trying to get a better focus on it, but kind of this one's got a four-lobed corolla here. Most of them are four-lobed, and they're quite striking. Now this plant's biggest flowering time is usually after the rainy season, more towards the spring, maybe early summer. However, in years where there's rainfall during the summer, this plant can experience the need to bloom again. And so this plant can be quite striking for a nice chunk of the year. And it's generally evergreen, so it's not going to shed a lot of foliage during the dry season, as this is a pretty drought-tolerant plant. So I'm going to go ahead and snap a couple pictures of the leaves and the flowers, and I'm going to get into some more of the details of this plant. Alright, so why is this plant called Bladder Pod? Well, the fruit of this plant looks like a sac or a bladder. And here we go. As you can see here, these are the fruits, which hold multiple seeds in them, and they're like inflatable pouches. And actually, they feel inflated when you touch them. So that's why we get the name bladder pod, because they're shaped like bladder, and they also look like seed pods. They're not technically legumes. They're not in the legume family, the Fabaceae, but they do look like seed pods. Therefore, the name bladder pod. Now, this is where we get into some varietal differences, as there are at least 3 distinctive variants of this plant. This variant here is the typical Cleomella arborea variety arborea, as these are the typical shaped fruits on the plant. So this is again Cleomella arborea variety arborea. However, there are 2 other variants that could potentially be found in this plant's range, which are the other 2 variants of this plant are Cleomella arborea variety angustata and Cleomella arborea variety globosa. So, as I previously mentioned, this is your typical variant, and the other 2 variants have differing shapes of their seed or their fruits. Now again, this is the typical variant right here, kind of roughly ovalish shaped. However, the variants angustata and globosa both differ in shape of their fruits. Angustata refers to the narrow aspect of the shape of its fruit, is a much narrower seed capsule. Might be kind of similar to this. This is kind of what I'd expect on angustata, even though this is a dehydrated seed or dehydrated fruit of this plant. Normally, that's how I'd expect variety angustata to look. And then there's also variety globosa, which refers to the globular shape of those fruits, which would be much more rounded, much more noticeably rounded. So again, this is the typical variant, variety arborea. Quite an interesting shrub. Loved by bees, very heavily used by bees. And there's another type of bug, another type of insect that really loves to make their home on this shrub. And it's these bugs here, not looking at the bee that's crawling around, but I'm looking at this one here with the reddish spots, reddish edges. I believe these are called box elder bugs, I believe. I'll have to double check the name on those, but if you find a bladder pod bush, chances are very high you're also going to find these insects as well. They seem to love these. Also makes good habitat for these guys here, western fence lizard. This Scaloporus occidentalis longipes. Just casually watching me do a spotlight video on this awesome shrub. Well, decided it was enough interaction for one day. So okay, what other kind of things do we look for on bladder pods? Well, let's look at some of the twigs. The twigs kind of have a purplish green overture. Right here, you can see it's kind of a purplish green color, kind of splotched a little bit. Some stems tend to be greener and other ones tend to be more purplish. And then as you move down, we get this light furrowing of dark brown and light grayish, gentle furrowing here on the medium and some of the lower branches, which eventually gives way to light gray furrowed bark lower down on the stems and trunks of this interesting shrub. So let me get a couple more pictures of some of the aspects of this plant. We'll see if my friend here my little friend here will approve, but I guess he's not feeling it, a male fence lizard. So let me go ahead and get a couple more pictures of the shrub, and we'll finish off with another brief note or two about this awesome plant. So, would this plant be a good plant for your garden? I would think so. I wouldn't try consuming any part of this plant. I wouldn't consume the fruits or the leaves or anything. I wouldn't consume any of it. But for an ornamental, this is a pretty tough plant. It grows pretty well in very dry areas. It does well in desert and seacoast conditions. I wouldn't plant it in an area that gets well below freezing at night, because this is low elevation, and it's a low elevation coastal and warm subtropical desert plant. So I wouldn't go planting it high up in the mountains where it probably would not survive. But say if you live in places like San Diego, coastal Orange County, LA County, or you live in Palm Springs or Borrego Springs, looks like you got yourself a really cool, tough plant that flowers profusely, especially in the spring. But if kept wet enough, it could flower potentially any time of the year. So this plant has year-round color, beautiful colored foliage, beautiful flowers. It's a great wildlife plant. So what's not to love? So again, Bladder Pod, Cleomella arborea, variety arborea, also including varieties Angustata and variety globosa, which will probably be covered in their own spotlight videos should I chance across them. And when I do, I'll make short mini spotlight videos on those variants with the specific differences in the appearance of those plants. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this right here. Used to be Paratoma arborea, variety arborea, Isomeris arborea, variety arborea, Cleomaceae, Cleomaceae arborea, variety arborea. I'm just waiting for the next taxonomical change on this plant. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this spotlight video on another piece of our awesome flora here in Southern California. See you on the next episode.